You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 18th of September 2013. Sober up in drunk tank and pay £400 to leave. Scotland, Wayne Stilwell jailed for Mosque bacon attack. Police officer having sex on duty is like taking a tea break. EU funding cuts to hit Portugal's poorest. Greece, Athens houses lose half value in 5 years. Marine Le Pen backs European election alliance with Wilders. Russians have sex holiday and hope for a car. Syria hands Russia proof of rebel chemical weapons use. As world watches Syria, Egypt launches major campaign against jihadists in Sinai. Thought for the day, is Islam Europe's end of days? And finally, talons or talons? I would like to extend the thanks of all at Radio Britain for the continued support and articles from our man in France, and welcome an addition to the RB family, that of our man in the UK Foreign Office, who is helping us as well. Without Amna Kafar we wouldn't be able to bring you the varied news we have, as he has contributed to us through thick and thin. UK news. Sober up in drunk tank and pay £400 to leave. Drunks who are a blight in our towns and cities may be held overnight in privately run drunk tanks and charged up to £400 under police leaders' proposals. The proposal is backed by a number of police and crime commissioners, believing a commercially run initiative would act as an extra deterrent to excessive drinking and would help lessen the cost of policing drunkards. Adrian Lee, the Chief Constable of Northamptonshire, said, "I don't see why the police service or the health service should pick up the duty of care for someone who has chosen to go out and get so drunk that they cannot look after themselves. So why don't we take them to a drunk cell owned by a commercial company and get the commercial company to look after them during the night until they are sober. When that is over, we will then issue them with a fixed penalty, and the company will be able to charge them for their care, which would be at quite a significant cost and might be a significant deterrent." The Telegraph reports it is estimated that it costs between £300 and £400 a night to hold someone in a police cell, more than a night in the Ritz hotel, while police can issue a fine of up to £80 for an offence of drunk and disorderly. World at 8. It sounds very much like a common sense proposal. Scotland, Wayne Stilwell jailed for Mosque bacon attack. A man who threw bacon into an Edinburgh mosque has been jailed for 10 months. Wayne Stilwell, 25, was caught on security cameras attaching the bacon to the handles of the main door at Edinburgh's central mosque. He then threw the bacon inside the building, knowing Muslims regard pork as unclean. At Edinburgh Sheriff Court earlier, he pled guilty to causing a breach of the peace. His lawyer said Stilwell was sorry for his crime. Sheriff Gordon Liddell said his actions had been grossly offensive and jailed him for 10 months. World at 8 states, "No, a herd of lovely piggies would have been grossly offensive and justified. It just shows how prison sentences are for one crime and not other more serious crimes. It all depends on how racist the magistrates are, doesn't it?" Police officer having sex on duty is like taking a tea break. An armed policeman who had sex on duty with a loaded gun in a holster attached to his belt has kept his job after a tribunal concluded it was similar to an officer taking a break to buy a cup of tea. PC Sean Jenkins, 36, was on patrol with Gwent Police in 2010 when he picked up another man's wife for a 40-minute tryst. He took his mistress back to his home in Caerphilly, South Wales, while a colleague waited outside. But a report into his conduct found the act did not pose a risk to public safety because he could have been back within a minute or two. World at 8 comments, Fail to see the cup of tea scenario, however. Talk about spending time on the job, not. He should have had a fine. This is worse than bacon in a mosque, isn't it? It doesn't set police standards very high, does it? European news. EU funding cuts to hit Portugal's poorest. Portugal may lose out on €20 million in annual EU food aid aimed to help feed the poorest, reports Reuters. The EU fund is set to replace another which has earmarked fewer resources for EU food programmes. Unlike other member states, Portugal has made preparations to replace the funding shortfall. Greece. Athens houses lose half value in 5 years. The economic crisis and extremely sluggish demand in the Greek real estate market have resulted in house prices nosediving by more than 50% since 2008, Daily Kathimerini reports, quoting experts. While there are plenty of great bargains to be found all around the Greek capital, funding real estate purchases is where the real problem lies, as banks have all but given up on issuing new mortgages, even in cases when a house is clearly a bargain. In most cases, meanwhile, asking prices are below the rate used by tax authorities, known as the objective value, meaning that buyers would be taxed on the estimated rather than the actual value of the purchase. Marine Le Pen backs European election alliance with Wilders. French nationalist politician Marine Le Pen is interested in forging a joint campaign for next year's European elections with Geert Wilders, leader of the anti-immigration PVV. Le Pen said in an interview with the NRC on Saturday that she could see merit in such a campaign. It is important that voters see we are not alone and that there are similar patriotic movements in every EU country, she said. Le Pen said she and Wilders differ in their approach to Islam. I am against the visibility of Islam in society. We have a tradition of a strict division between church and state, so I think religious symbolism has no place in the street. But I have nothing against Islam per se. Wilders regards Islam as a backward religion and has likened the Koran to Hitler's Mein Kampf. World news. Russians have sex holiday and hope for a car. The Russians are addressing their declining demographics by having a special holiday, take off for the work to have sex day. If a baby is produced 9 months from an official holiday, the couple receives a car. It takes 2.1 babies per family in order to replace a dying population. Most European nations are way below this statistic, thus committing self-suicide. Whether they are not having babies for economic reasons, selfishness, increase in cheap and readily available abortions, depraved lifestyles, lack of housing, lack of jobs, high unemployment encouraged by a generous welfare state, or education, the problem is that most Europeans are self-destroying through attrition, fast replaced by North Africans and Middle Easterners who do have lots of babies per family. World at 8 comments. Pity my better half and I could do with a new car, but of course if I produced anything it could be classed as a miracle or the second coming, whatever. But I still like the sound of a new car. Syria hands Russia proof of rebel chemicals weapons use. Russian Deputy FM rejects UN chemical inspector's report as politicised, biased and one-sided. A Russian official has claimed to have received evidence of the use of chemical weapons by Syrian rebels and dismissed a UN report suggesting the Syrian regime used poison gas as unreliable. Deputy Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov also slammed a UN report on an August the 21st chemical weapons attack in the Syrian capital Damascus, which killed over 1,000 people, as politicised and one-sided. The report, which concluded that sarin gas had been used in the attack on the rebel-held Damascus suburb, did not explicitly apportion blame for the attack, but Western leaders claimed it was proof that the Assad regime was indeed behind the deadly attack. But Rybakov rejected the report's reliability, saying that the inspectors only examined evidence of the August 21st attack and ignored 3 previous incidents of alleged chemical weapons use. He also claimed to have been handed evidence by the Syrian government which pointed to the use of chemical weapons by rebel forces. His comments came following a meeting with Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim in Damascus. World at 8 states, the media is full of the fact that sarin was used, however not so full on the essential fact of which side used it. Maybe both, or maybe the rebels firing from the same area. The Western powers need to either keep out or get their facts straight, and we might never know the actual truth because it isn't palatable to the supporters of the jihadist rebels. As the world watches Syria, Egypt launches major campaign against jihadists in Sinai. While the eyes of the world are on Syria, Egypt's military is routing jihadists from the vast and lawless Sinai Peninsula and, according to some regional observers, showing the US how to conduct a war on terrorists. Under orders from General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the military leader governing Egypt since the Muslim Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi was ousted, the Egyptian military is stepping up the fight against the growing coalition of Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda and other radical Muslims gathering in the massive desert peninsula. Although the jihadist activity in the Sinai could be as big as a threat to regional stability as the civil war in Syria, Sisi's effort to confront terrorism at his doorstep comes without endorsement from the Obama administration, which has denounced the military takeover in Egypt. world at 8 states. I am 100% behind El-Sisi. As you see, I am not anti-Islam in the right place or just for the sake of it. This general has the right idea. Thought for the day. Is Islam Europe's end of days? I truly believe that Islam is the end of days for the UK and Europe. I personally do not see the multicultural and diverse benefits this particular religion brings to Europe and its peoples, varied and bickering though they may be. I have said before, and I will say again, my own tribes don't appeal to me that much, so why should I accept or be beaten into submission by another Middle Eastern tribe or tribes and not regard it as an invasion of both me and my country? We have countries in Europe opening their doors and their populations to varying forms of abuse from these immigrants, which always follows inevitably like rain follows cloud, and their governments do nothing about it. Why? The same reason our governments do nothing about Islam in particular, because they can yell loudest and longest, and as we know from our school days, those who can win. It isn't the child doing the dirty deed that gets caught, it's often the one talking about it that used to get the whack over the knuckles. Now Cleggie's giveaway next year, which will cost the taxpayer £600 million a year in free school meals for children up to 7. Now who is this for, you may say? Of course look at the stats and you will see it will benefit the immigrant children more, and as the Muslim children are being produced at a huge rate, it'll predominantly be taken up by this section of under 7s. Just see the so-called public articles on schools and ethnic children and rejoice, or rather not. Critics said that the previous Labour government's open-door immigration policy had created huge problems for integration, which was now threatening the country's social cohesion. The Department for Education figures revealed in a Freedom of Information request show that 84 schools recorded last year that no pupils on their rolls were white British. Of those, 67 are primaries, 8 secondaries and the remainder special or pupil referral units. The statistics derived from the annual school census found that the highest concentration is in Birmingham with 22 such schools, followed by Oldham with 8, Leicester with 7 and the London Borough of Tower Hamlets with 6. We know that poor British white boys are less likely to succeed than nearly any other group. More than 60% of primary school staff reported an increase in number of children wetting or soiling themselves at school. Almost 1/5 of 4 to 5-year-olds could not sound or name the letters of the alphabet. Reports suggested that the traditionally white working class families also put a low value on education. What this report doesn't say is that poor British boys are ignored in schools, especially if there's a high immigrant influx, because they have to teach the newcomers some sort of English on arrival, as most do not and will not speak English as their mother tongue. The increase in untrained children is a direct result of both immigrant mothers and white mothers having to work and having children in social childcare. They don't train, they just mop them up. Most 4-year-olds are foreign and of course don't speak the Western alphabet, and white working class families are no more. There is no working class. We are all working class, as we all have to work. But for generations in this country, boys and girls were put to work for money for their families to survive. So no, education was not top priority then, and also it had to be paid for. Our immigrants walk into a fully funded and free education system, or else they wouldn't come here. Not content with taking over our education system with their protests about veils, the wearing or non-wearing of, and halal food being served to all school pupils regardless of their religion, and the sheer numbers of Muslim children taking up places originally designed for English and British children, and I'm sorry, but a Muslim is not British in any sense of the word. We have the media harking on about poor white trash and their families not being interested in education. Does this mean we have to ignore them and keep educating a generation of Muslim children who will grow up to put all their loyalties to Islam and not this country, that has, in effect, fed and educated them from birth? Are we that stupid to raise an army within our own territories to make our own lives and the lives of our children impossible, to say nothing of totally losing our own culture at the same time? Take no notice of future stats, figures, prognostics. Just suffice to say we are being overrun now, at this minute, at this time and in this week. All of our adopted laws, including that of the Human Rights Brigade, are made specifically to rob us, you and I, of any hope of obtaining well-paid suitable jobs, a proper national health service and attention, a good and sound British education for our children, a pass to an Islamic free university and buying a property that isn't within the sound of a mosque or within harassment distance of a ghetto or community. Our own government and people are telling us not to get old or elderly because all the monies that should have been put towards giving you a good pension and home care or even care home facilities is being ploughed into either a free meals system for immigrant children or a railway line that will enable these self-same immigrants to go from one large town to another and cash in on an even larger scale. That is why Islam is the end of days for us. It'll be the end of our civilization as we know it and have enjoyed for hundreds of years. Make no mistake, all the student riots, the protests, the court cases and the marches are all funded and marketed to our students, liberals, communists and atheists by Saudi or Qatar. Many of our universities are heavily funded by these countries and all in the name of multiculturalism, diversity and peace. All the mega mosques being built throughout Europe now are funded from the oil-rich Middle East and all in the names of peace and understanding between communities. But in fact these mosques will not be available to your eye in any sense of the word, any more than in certain areas in our own country where a mosque has sprung up and there are young men telling us in our own land not to get near the building. This building which is supposed to reflect the peaceful and generous nature of the beast that is Islam. To cap it all with our own lovies telling us that we are no longer an indigenous people and that we all descended from immigrants, which is a load of twaddle, we have Obama in the US telling us that Islam has always been a part of the United States. Who is this lunatic kidding? Goebbels himself couldn't have done better than the propaganda we are being subjected to nowadays. However, there is an email going around which certainly puts paid to this particular bit of pro-Islamic nonsense, and it's from our man in the UKFO. Where were the Muslims during World War II? They were aligned with Adolf Hitler. The Muslim Grand Mufti himself met with Adolf Hitler, reviewed the troops and accepted support from the Nazis in killing Jews. Finally, Mr Obama, where were Muslims on September the 11th, 2001? If they weren't flying planes into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon or a field in Pennsylvania, killing nearly 3,000 people on our own soil, they were rejoicing in the Middle East. No one can dispute the pictures shown from all parts of the Muslim world celebrating on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC and other cable news networks that day. Strangely, the very moderate Muslims whose arses you bend over backwards to kiss in Cairo, Egypt on June the 4th were stone cold silent post 9/11. To many Americans their silence has meant approval for the acts of that day. And that, Mr Obama, is the rich heritage Muslims have here in America. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the Barbary pirates. They were Muslims. And now we can add November the 5th, 2009. The slaughter of American soldiers at Fort Hood by a Muslim major is a doctor and a psychiatrist who was supposed to be counselling soldiers returning from battle in Iraq and Afghanistan. That, Mr Obama, is the Muslim heritage in America. And that settles that one, but I'm shocked at the way in which our UK establishment have jumped on the Islamic bandwagon. It cannot be surely because the Muslims are so nice to us, because they aren't, or because they don't want to disturb or alter our way of life or religion to suit their own, because they do, or because they limit their children to fit in with our island size, because they don't, or because they respect our people and our young females, because it is apparent they don't. So why don't we treat these people as the invaders they are? They aren't poor refugees from just over a border, they are an invading army. They just use their women to do it by breeding us out of our own country and being encouraged to do so by our pathetic media and the government in the name of diversity. We are allowing Islam the upper hand and we will regret it. Islam is like the gay community. I have no problem with a person's religion or sexuality. I really couldn't care less, as long as both are conducted in private. What I resent is that alternative lifestyles have taken over both in the media and in education. Now to be fairly normal or heterosexual is wrong, just as it is wrong to be a young white male or a young white female who hasn't a partner or has been impregnated by a person of colour. And frankly now soon anyone who isn't Muslim will be a second-class citizen or worse, and all by fairly legal means. And these means have been and still are promoted by our governments, and all by that much used and Marxist invention, racism. Most people would rather be called a paedophile than a racist, sad but true. And until we get the people of this country to realise how dumbed down they've been and how accepting of strangers into this country they've been, nationalism doesn't stand a chance. Do you think that sometime in the future, when we are forbidden to go into areas of our towns and cities, when we are forced to buy and eat strange foods, when our children are speaking a foreign language and believing in a foreign god, when our girl children are summarily aborted, when we are sterilised or forbidden over a certain number of children, when our history is no longer and our future is even more terrible, when we are forced to wear the mark of the beast, who do you think will help us? The EU, the UN, NATO or the rest of Europe? No. They will all be under Islam. There will be no hope once we have crossed the Rubicon, and our end of days will be upon us. And we will have contributed to make it so. The end is not nigh. It can be avoided and even stopped, but it will take affirmative action, and take a massive amount of people to do so. We can't rely on any government to help us because it won't pay them to do so, and the world is ruled by mammon and oil. Once more it'll be down to us racists to defeat Islam, and then history will rewrite itself for the better. And finally, talons or talons? Christine the Duchess Walton has retained the Guinness World Record for the longest fingernails, an accolade she has held since 2011. The 46-year-old singer, who goes by the stage name The Duchess, has not cut her fingernails since 1990. The gold-painted talons hang at 11 foot on the left hand and 10 foot on the right side. The mother of 4 from Las Vegas insists her long curling nails are not expensive to maintain. Well, actually maintenance I do it myself, so it doesn't really cost me anything. I make my own polish, I put in a little extra nail polish remover, it makes them dry faster. She added I file them every 3 months down to the fingernail and put another layer of acrylic on. Miss Walton was originally surprised at being approached for the record, but soon warmed to the idea, saying, "I want to be remembered for something great." This presenter says she certainly will. She's a lady of colour with a blonde wig and 11-foot nails. Well, great work if you can get it, and I'm sure America will be so glad she's managed to produce 4 more like herself to carry on the great tradition. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night.